All right, it's been a long week, but it's Friday night, back in the garage. So let's do one for the BMW boys. Let's do a full refurbishment on the M62 Alusil block. So this guy, everything's aluminum. It's no sleeve. You got aluminum piston riding on aluminum sleeve. And these are super problematic. They're hard to rebuild. You will struggle to find a machinist who will even touch it. Most rebuild shops won't do this. But I figured out the secret sauce. Done it a couple times now. If you look back at my videos, I got a hone by hand, like a piston in the block refurbishment video, but this is going to be the full process. So to start, we got to strip it down, get the pistons, all that out of it. So we'll cover that in this video. First thing you're looking for when you're going to find a block to rebuild here, nice bores that look like this, pretty smooth. Got some areas of polish, that's fine. Even some minor scoring that you can like not even really feel with a fingertip. All that's good. What you want to avoid is probably the reason you're here. But when you get a cylinder completely scored up like this, the whole block is basically a throwaway. And thus why we got this guy just chilling on the ground here. If you see that kind of scoring, you're going to need to probably re-sleeve the entire block. You're talking like $1,000. And again, a lot of machine shops will not even touch it because the brittle nature of the silicon impregnated aluminum makes it very hard to sleeve. So risky procedure to sleeve it, but that's probably your best route unless you want to do what we're about to do here. Let's get tearing it apart. So first I'm going to remove all the block fittings here. And you'll find a number of 13 mil kind of bolts or like pedestal bolts on the timing side. Also a couple 13 mil just blanking bolts on each side of the engine. There's also a couple fittings on the back, I believe a 13 mil, and also some like they're going to be like an M5 or something. They're just like an NPT plug. There's a couple over here on the oiling system that are worth taking out just to get a proper clean out. And all these M8 plugs also have a crush washer behind, so make sure that you pop those guys out as well. Just so we can get this thing very cleaned out internally, externally, and make sure there's no debris in the oiling system. Sometimes these head dowels could be a little tough, but gently work it out with a pair of hose pliers, and these are going to need to be replaced. This one's an M62 Vanos block, and it's got a one-way valve on oil feeds to head. So there's one on each side, but a little rubber kind of retainer. I struggle to call it a gasket. It doesn't seal anything. It just kind of makes sure that the one-way valve is properly spaced. Just got to pry that guy out without marring up our head surface. And then below that is the one-way valve. So I don't believe these are on the non-Vanos block. And if you're converting a Vanos block to non-Vanos, as we're going to be doing here, this wouldn't be needed to reinstall. Though, you know, a little bit of extra oil held up in the head when the engine's off, not the worst thing. It may be there on the non-Vanos actually. So just be aware of those guys. Taking a look at the oil system blanking fitting on the very back of the block. So this has like a pressure regulator in it. If I had to guess, I'm willing to bet that this feeds the oil jets. So this funky one with the O-ring, back of the block. So next we're going for the oil jets with a 5mm hex key. And it might be necessary to move our crank a little bit. So we got a 27mm wrench on the crank nut. They're not held in there with too much. Let's pull one of these things out and have a look. So on a lot of other oil jet systems, that little kind of pressure one-way valve will be integrated into the jet itself. On BMW M62, I think it's that fitting at the back of the block. So once that thing opens up, it starts to jet. So let's take a look at some of the orientation marks on the bottom rotating assembly here. So your crank main caps are marked 1, 2, 3, and they've got this hump on the left side as you're looking down at it from the timing side. But notably, bearing cap number 4 has no marking, and neither does 5. It kind of makes sense why they've done it that way. And the reason is that 4 is the only one that doesn't have the thrust washer machined in, that also doesn't have a marking. So typically I'll peen in a mark if I'm being aggressive. But I think today we're just going to leave it like this because I got this video to look back on. Your oil pump tube hose thing just pulls right out, O-ringed. So now I'm going to go after the exterior 13 and 16 mil kind of bearing cap bolts. They're not on there super tight, and it helps to have a pass-through style socket set. You can also just use a long socket, but let's pop a couple of these bad boys off. So the 13 mils not on there very tight. And then these guys, it's a larger thread, so it fights you a little bit more. Just covering up that sharp edge so I don't hit myself on it. This one already cracked loose. But I'll spin all these guys out and then get on to the next step. Next, I'm going to go after all the rod bolts. And I guess it's a good time to mention this is my way of doing this. It's probably not the way it's going to tell you in a manual if one exists. But essentially, I'm going to take all the rod caps off, lift the crank out, and then have maximum access to our rods to push them out of the block. So using a external Torx E12, just getting in there, loosening up all the rod bolts. I'll start just by loosening them before we start taking any off. And here's why I'm not taking them off right now. You're going to find it necessary to rotate the block. Sorry, rotate the crank in order to get at your next set of rod bolts. So just going to crack them all loose so I'm not fighting them. And I'll just go down the rest of the line like that. So I was hoping I could get cute and remove all the rod caps all at once, but just the orientation of the crank is not going to allow that. And in particular, I'm just not going to have access to get all the bolts out completely. So on this cylinder, I've got both rods disconnected, and I'm just going to gently shove it down the cylinder, being super, super careful not to let the side of the rod drag on that sleeve, because these all aluminum sleeves are extremely easy to scratch up. So just going to be really, really careful here. So got to pass the rings, and then just being hyper careful. Okay, piston's out on the bottom side. And I'm just going to let the rod dangle for a second and reach up underneath. And just being ultra, ultra precise. But the reason you're not so worried about keeping these caps in order, I mean, you're going to do your best. But these are fracture split rods, so the cap will only go on one rod in one orientation, and you can't screw them up. So if you can see, it's just broken, sheared off steel right here. And that broken side is going to be individual to each rod. But yeah, look at these things. Super beefy. They look like they've been machined. Like, this doesn't look cast. So to me, I think this is a forged factory rod. And it's, you know, real thick. So love these engines for their potential to make tons of power. So let's talk piston and rod orientation marks real quick. So the piston has an arrow that faces the timing cover side. And notably, you've got both intakes facing towards each other, like each head, the intake side is facing towards each other with the exhaust facing outward, typical of a V8. But what you got is this little bump on the rod. So you can see there's two bumps here. Those bumps face each other like that. So if you can see, when you're setting these up, you're actually going to have to put the bump on opposite sides of the piston, if that makes sense. So if you look at this matching pair from cylinders 7 and 8, in order to get the piston orientation correct and the bumps together, you're putting, so bumps on the same side on the rods. The pistons are now arrow in opposite direction, if that makes sense. So you're going to have to set up your pistons kind of in two opposing pairs, and then match the bumps on the rods in the middle when reassembling. So before I yank this next set of pistons and rods out, there's that bump on one rod, and there's the bump on the other rod. So you can see that they're facing each other. And then the other thing that's notable is the rod only has this kind of peened in writing on one side, and that kind of faces down towards the oil pan. So like that side's got writing, this side does not. This side will have writing. So hopefully those are little clues on getting this stuff back together. Let's take a close look at one of these fracture split rods. So this thing was fully machined and then cracked in half, and it's hard to even see where it mates up. Like, it's just an absolute hairline. This side doesn't have a bolt in it, so you can see it a little bit more obviously, but you know, when it's bolted together, there's like zero tolerance between the two pieces. And I'll show you what I meant by you know, the caps being unique to each rod and why you can't really mix them up. So on like a typical forge rod, aftermarket rod, you get, because it's plain flat on either side, you could screw up the orientation quite easily. But on these, if you get it in the wrong orientation, it just simply doesn't fit together. You know, large gap left. It's not going to go together like that at all. But in its proper orientation, it goes together perfect. So even if you just had them in a pile, I mean, it would take you some time to go through that process that I just did, but you'd figure it out. But real beautifully made pistons and rods on these things. So while we got this in hand, I'll mention one other thing. So aluminum piston, aluminum block. And the only thing that's keeping that from galling and destroying itself is this very small patch of like a ferrous compound that is film coated onto the side of the skirt. So if you leave these things in humidity or get water on it, you'll notice that it rusts. Like if you go and try to clean up your piston in the sink, you'll have like a rusty formation here. And that is an iron impregnated film. So on this one, you can see that that iron film is nearly worn away in that area. And there's actually, it might be hard to pick up on the camera. I'll try to move it in the light. But there's some vertical streaking through it. So it's actually just begun to gall, like especially right here on the ridge, you can see is just begun to gall a little bit. So I think this motor has been treated quite nicely, but it was about to approach its fatality point. So good time to tear it apart. My plan to overcome this is to Teflon coat the piston. And I've already got those done. I'm also going to be running I'll be running this, the M62TU with the valve pockets, but I'm going to do it on a non-TU head and shave the block on both heads, maybe like 1 thou each. Tiny bump and compression, but it'll have an absolute ton of piston to valve clearance because I'll be basically running the reliefs on an engine that doesn't require it. Taking a look at all the rod bearings that came out, and there's really not much that jumps out. You can see, some light scores here and there. Looks like some grit got through the oil system at some point. A couple of these show evidence of like a side loading on the piston. So yeah, it's like the bearing got kiltered a little bit, right, as it was running, and then it wears on one side. So might be, due to the thrust washers wearing a little bit. It might just be the nature of the engine. But all in all, everything looks pretty good, and I don't think there's any major problems with this thing as far as rotating assembly, geometry, or anything else like that. Close-up of the rod journals on the crank. They look quite nice. So, not surprising because the bearings came out all fine. The crank side is solid steel. The bearing side is like at best some kind of Babbitt or like aluminized alloy, so much softer. But yeah, this looks great with a little bit of polishing, some cleanup. It's going to work great. So moving up to eTorx 14, we're now going to crack the remaining main bearing caps loose. And this isn't a girdle. They're all separate, so, your loosening pattern is going to be just whatever you want. Taking them one off at a time. So I'm just getting it to crack like a quarter turn, and then going back to the other bolt, taking them both off like quarter turn at a time. With all these inner eTorx 14 mils cracked loose, I can now just start spinning them out with the power tool. So on a poorly maintained M62 where you're not doing tons of oil changes, these cam caps will get kind of sludged in place, but I can tell like these ones are already pretty much loose. So again, I think this was quite well maintained. I'll just start picking them out, and then we'll take a look at the, number 5, like the clutch side cam cap with its thrust washers in place. So just give me a moment here. Just wiggle them and try to pull it straight out. I'll pull out all these bearings. We'll take a look at them too. All right, I'm losing the thrust washers. Yeah, I lost the thrust washers on both sides, but So we got that number 5 main bearing cap with thrust washers, and you can see the tang is kind of offset, so it forces you to position it with the groove facing out on either side. And these are worth keeping because these are unbelievably expensive for some reason. I think they're like $150 a side. So I keep all of these that I come across and I measure them and reuse the OEM ones. If I could find an aftermarket cheap replacement, I would do it, but I just simply have never come across that. So I used to throw these away, but now I'm keeping them. Just a look at the main journals. So the mains are looking real good. Just a little bit of wear up here, but the whole crankshaft's going to get polished. Probably make a video on crank polishing at home pretty soon here. And it looks like it could honestly just use a little tiny bit of extra oil clearance. Hard to pick up, but just the tiniest little bit of wear on main journal number 1. So getting a little bit more oil throughput through that bearing surface. We're talking like micron level material removal, but that would help keep it cool and lubricated. Let's yank this crank out. So there's nothing to it on crank removal. You simply just lift it straight up and out. Losing a main bearing there. Taking a look at the main bearings on the top side and block. So top side main bearing has a nice groove. It's got your oil holes for oil pressure. And then notably, there's also these thrust washers on the bottom. So there's 2, 1 on each side, or I guess I should say top half of the block as well. So 4 thrust washers in total. Quick look at the main bearings, and again, nothing really popping out. Interestingly, one side of the thrust washer was like totally unaffected. The other one has a bit of wear on it. Main cap 1, 3, and 5 had more wear than the rest, interestingly. And that wear is primarily on the bottom side, like the oil pan side bearing, as you'd expect, because that's the direction of thrust during combustion. So again, the engine would probably have run fine, but it came out of a junkyard, so we're not going to trust that at all. And this one was out of an X5, so we're on the automatic transmission. Might change some of the thrust dynamics that it sees. Here we got all of our pistons, our caps, and the crank all lined up. Everything's looking pretty good. Hasn't even been through wash yet, and it's already gleaming. Looks good. So I think that's going to do it for today. We will come back and wash up this block. Start getting ready to actually hone these sleeves out, and we'll use the AM30 paste in a felt hone. So very different than honing an iron block. So if you like that video, if you're wondering anything else about this procedure or this kind of specialized rebuilding on Alusu blocks, drop a comment. And as always, like and subscribe.